Thank God it's Friday. Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Life. I am Precious Chukudi. Of course, we'll start off with the front pages of the papers this morning, and we're looking at Vanguard first. Vanguard is leading with old notes who obeys Supreme Court's ruling, says federal government. The rider says the parties, other stakeholders split over Supreme Court's ruling. Obey Supreme Court order, APC tells Buhari. APC using court to twist CBN to buy votes. That's coming from CNPP. We are against opposition to Apex Court decision. That's coming from NMPP. Naira redesign policy, ill-timed, poorly implemented. That's coming from Kachuku. Why CBN must obey Supreme Court's ex parte order. That's coming from Falana. Misguided element against court order, and that's coming from Matawale. We can see further story showing APC rally in Sokoto. And on page 8, currency swap policy affecting military operations. That's coming from NSA. Maureen Alagua appointed NSITF MD CEO as federal government reconstitutes board. Petrol shortage. Independent marketers begin lifting at 272 naira per litre. Bank workers threaten to down tools over attack. On sport, you have Messi's luck can make PSG win Champions League, and that's coming from Okocha. And on page 16, from Donu Kogbara, we have Soludo and his co-travelers must realize that Obi is not popular because he's Igbo. Anti-Igbo element of Igbo extraction must realize that Obi is popular for completely different reasons altogether. Also, a quote from Oriel Lakemfa says, as the eighth commemoration of his mother rolled by this Tuesday, I made a silent prayer for my friend George Muchai. May his murderers never know peace. Stories above, we have a federal government orders of varsity shots for general election. You can see that story on page 9. Buhari prepares for May 29th handover as set up a transition council. All right, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian is leading with Buhari prepares for May 29th set up transition council. The writer says that gives 2 slots to successor. 2023 election, federal government orders closure of a varsity for 3 weeks. Lecturers will swear to oath of neutrality, says INEC. INEC laments 1,241 pre-election suits, seeks a pro bono service from NBA. And of course, it's 15 days left to the general election. There's also a big story on pages 4 and 5, cancer, dealing with high incident cost of containment. On page 6, Falana task CBN to obey Supreme Court's ex parte order. Stories above, Naira fuel scarcity, TUC on alert, youth begin 14-day nationwide protest. Town planners seek stiffer penalties for building collapse offenders. Fuel crisis, NMDPRA, Ipman agrees to 172 naira per ex-depot price. And gunmen ambush kill 4 military officers in Delta. All right, let's take a look at the Nation newspaper. The Nation is leading with more banks close branches for lack of cash to pay customers. The writer says cash crunch bites harder. NSA scarcity affecting military operations. And SANS, CBN must obey Supreme Court or ruling. Stories above, over 20,000 dead in Turkey, Syria earthquakes. NDIC set to pay 30 failed bank depositors. And of course, stories below, we have varsity to close from February 22. EFCC appeals a contempt ruling on Bauer. Let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. The Punch is leading with a new Naira. Confusion deepens as CBN deadline ends today. The writer says presidency, CBN silent on Supreme Court's ruling. Banks, customers await Emefiele's directive. Buhari's 7-day promise expires. Nigerians queue in vain at ATM's banking hall. Federal government will comply with Supreme Court's ruling, and that's coming from the AGF. TUC threatens to sue government over scarcity. And of course, we can see a photo story showing one dies in Lagos Ibadan road crash. Suspects are arrested for killing Ogun couple son. You can see that on page 5. Council reviews a training as 14,000 nurses join Jackpot train. VCs also disagree on federal government short varsity. Stories above. Buhari orders setting up transition panel on Valentine's Day. Federal government sanctions 302 broadcast stations, issues 67 new licenses. Government vows penalty for few marketers rejecting POS transfer. And lastly, on the front page of the Punch newspaper, we live in fear as earthquake deaths tops 20,000. And that's coming from a Turkey-based footballer, Babajide. That's all we can take on the front pages of the papers. Join us after the break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. If you're just joining us today in the news on Vanguard Life, I am Precious Chukudi. Joining me to talk about some of the stories on the front pages of the papers this morning is Dr. Taye Obatero, Associate Professor, Department of Mass Communications. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's delve in. And of course, we're still talking about the old notes and the new Naira notes. And it may seem as though that the federal government has, agreed to obey the ruling of the Supreme Court suspending the February 10th deadline, which is today, given by the CBN on exchange of Naira notes. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's expected that government should obey court orders. We are governed by the rule of law. And so government is expected to obey court order. The only issue is whether it's going to have any significant impact, because a lot of people have already, especially the average Nigerians, they have already deposited their old notes in the banks, are unable to get the new notes, because following the deadline given, people rush to go and deposit their old notes. And so even when you say people should continue to accept the old notes, it's not even available in the hands of a lot of people again. Only those who stopped it, who had excess, can still have old notes to spend. Moreover, I know of someone today who had an old note I wanted to use to pay, and it was rejected by petrol marketers at the filling station. So whether it's going to have any significant effect is a different ballgame. The solution is for them to just release the new notes so that people can have access to it and stop this situation that we're in. It's no longer a situation where people have money, people don't have money. People have their monies now and cannot even access it. Salaries have been paid, people cannot afford, people cannot get it in banks in just here. Yesterday, they gave 10,000 naira to people. People wanted to withdraw, and it's only 10,000 naira they could give to people. Even the ATMs, the same thing. So how are people supposed to survive? And then to worsen the matter, even the cashless facilities are not working. The people cannot. People will go and transact businesses on POS. They will say there's a network problem. It should not credit the accounts, and people's money will be taken from their accounts, and it should not be credited to the people they're trying to pay. So as a result, people are also now rejecting the transactions through POS. It's a really bad situation, and I think government, no matter what the intention is, should think about the consequences, the punishment, the hardship that people are going through in just this situation.
During the course of the week, a group of protesters had marched to the CBN office, also the AGF office, saying that the court's ruling would enable politicians, buy votes. What do you think about it?
Well, if the intention was to stop people from using old notes that they have stopped to buy votes, whether it is, I don't know if it's going to really have any significant impact, because I don't see people have even given old notes again now. So even if you have old notes, and at the end of the CBN, the Supreme Court judgment, you go and bring old notes to distribute to people who are not sure people will be right like that. So in a way, the government will be obeying the court order by not asking people to reject it. But Nigerians, a lot of Nigerians will actually continue to reject the old notes, because we have already been psyched not to accept it again, and it just not work. It just not work. The only question I would give is There are some people that in school of thought that think that government is also really trying to foment trouble because some people, the so-called people, do not want elections to hold. So I hope people will not fall into this trap by becoming violent and creating a situation where those who don't want election to hold will not have an excuse to say that they're postponing election or coming up with an interim government just to truncate the election. So there are too many narratives that are coming up, and I just hope that the best is what will happen for the country.
All right. Do you think that the Naira redesign policy is ill-timed and poorly implemented?
Of course, I subscribe to that. It's still time coming so close to the election, and then just a little time. In other countries, when they introduce new notes, they don't give so short deadlines for the rejection. They introduce the new notes, and the old notes continue to be accepted alongside until they are gradually withdrawn by the banks. But that is not the situation we saw. We saw a very short deadline, and then even if the deadline, if within the months that they gave, there was about 6 weeks that they gave, they had released the old notes. They wouldn't have released kind of crisis. But the new notes, they wouldn't have released that kind of crisis. But the new notes were not even available because people made efforts to change and they didn't have them. So it is the time, and like I said, whatever might have been the reason behind it is not giving the desired result, except of course if there's another result that was preempted or defeated that is not in the interest of Nigeria.
All right. The National Union of Bank, Insurance and Financial Institution Employees, NUBIFI, they've threatened to shut down the banking system over increasing insecurity and attacks on bank staff as a result of, the scarcity of the new Naira note. And we've seen different videos, online of how some of these banks have been affected. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the workers in banks are finding themselves in this kind of situation. Agreed, there might be some bad eggs within them. Those said to have been hoarding or to be selling the new notes to people. But I think those are just a few people. I think the major problem is still the problem of supply. If the supply were adequate, there won't be any need to hoard, even if anybody intended to hoard, because they will be to be adequate, they won't be able to hoard or begin to sell it. So the problem still lies in the insufficiency of the supply chain from the central bank. And I sympathize with the bankers. People are really frustrated. If you saw, at least we have seen videos of people who go naked just to express their disgust and their frustration. So if it gets that bad, there's nothing like having money and not being able to access it. It's a very terrible situation, especially when one has responsibilities to take care of. You have children to feed, you have bills to pay, and so on and so forth. And it's not money, but you don't have access to it. So it leads to frustration, and people are bound to misbehave as a result of this frustration. And so, of course, the bank workers that people are seeing, and they are the ones that will be at the receiving end of people's frustration. So I sympathize with them, and anything that can be done to secure them is fine. But closure of banks may not really solve the problem, because the people will continue to look for money. So if we close some banks, the other ones will experience a kind of siege. And unless the supply situation is in place, like I said, we're going to have cases of violence and overreaction from the people.
What are the implications of the scarcity of the Naira notes and fuel for the forthcoming election?
The implication is grave, because it also means that one, people might become disillusioned and say that this government people are all the same. We don't trust politicians again, and so if you can subject us to this, there's no reason to go and vote. Another aspect is the aspect of people even being able to move. There may be people who need to travel. We're talking about students going back to their home to go and vote. When they have money to even transport themselves home, that they will be able to do that. When people cannot access money, how do they travel? How do they move from one point to the other to go and express, to go and cast their votes? So it has implications. It has implications, and it is not a problem to look at of wanting to stop politicians from using money to buy votes. What about the other areas of the well-being of the people? People who will usually go to police stations and wait to be able to cast their votes if they've not got money to buy food to eat or to keep body and soul together. How are they going to be interested in voting? So I think we're actually, in a way, sabotaging the election itself by this kind of policy that makes people to be broke and not have access to money.
All right, you just made mention of the fact that, of course, the federal government hinted that still need to go on a break so that they can go participate in the general elections. But then again, we know that during the period of when the PVCs collections of PVCs were still ongoing, students were in schools. Most of them were in school. They had resumed. What do you think about this situation, basically?
Well, it's difficult to really say what might have happened if students were in school where they were supposed to be collecting their PVCs and now they have been asked to go home. One hopes the same government will make it possible for them to be able to collect their PVCs when they get home. And then even the closeness of the dates that schools are supposed to close, that is 22nd to the election date, is it's something to look at. By the time people begin to move if we assume that schools close by 22nd and people begin to travel, what time would they have? It's only those who already have their PVCs that will be useful to. Those who are unable to collect their PVCs may just not be able to participate in the electoral process. So it's I don't know. It doesn't seem a well thought out thing as far as I'm concerned, because if people go home and still don't have the PVCs to cast their votes, then what's the essence of closing down the schools?
All right, let's move ahead and talk about this one. And according to reports, the president has approved the establishment of a presidential transition council ahead of May 29th handover. What's your take on that?
I see it as politics, because people are saying that there might be an agenda to truncate the electoral process. So I think the president wants to demonstrate that he's committed to transition. And that's why he's setting up a transition committee well ahead. So me, I say it's politics because I think it's a reaction to insinuation that there might be a plan to frustrate the election. And that means maybe some people do not want to hand over power, or they want to set up an interim government. So that's the way I see it. I see it as just a move to show or demonstrate that the government is committed to handing over.
All right, let's take a look at Mr. and Mrs. before we go. Mr. is speaking, says, my friend did not deny knowing the lady. He said he was just helping her. That's all. That's the reason he only transfers money to her. No physical contact. And Mrs. says, but he didn't deny putting her in the family way. Did he also transfer the pregnancy?
Maybe the pregnancy was transferred by another remote means.
Or he transferred the pregnancy through POS. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Tayo Bateru, Associate Professor, Department of Mass Communication. Thank you for sharing your thought with us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Also, remember that you can equally like, share, and subscribe on all our social media platforms showing on your screen, on Facebook, Instagram, and also on WhatsApp. You can go to our website, www.vanguardindia.com, to find out more. I am Precious Chukudi, and thank you for